Hi everyone, this is your host Prasha and welcome to her STEM Stories, episode number 96. And today's iTunes review of the week is by Dave's728. Prasha is a wonderful host and asks very thoughtful questions. I always finish each episode inspired to work a little more harder at my STEM career than I did yesterday. Best way to start a Monday and a Wednesday. Thank you, Dave's728, for this wonderful review because this is exactly what I want the show to be, inspiring and motivating for everyone in STEM. If you want me to read your review, please leave us one on iTunes or any other podcasting platform. Today's episode is an amazing interview with Niba, who is one of my favorite people on Instagram. She's an artist, a model, a plant biologist, and everything in between. She is so wonderful, and in this episode, we talk about her wonderful STEM journey. So let's get started.
Welcome to Her STEM Story, a podcast about real women with extraordinary science, technology, engineering, and mathematics stories. In this show, we'll talk to some absolutely inspiring women and highlight some women-led organizations in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We'll learn more about their work, their struggles, and how they think we can close the gender gap in STEM professions. Keep listening to get inspired.
Our guest today is Niba, a genetics PhD student studying how plants grow using synthetic biology. She creates notes about beauty through science. She channels all her different talents through her Instagram and her YouTube channel. Outside of the lab, Niba is also a model and enjoys breaking stereotypes for people of color, women, and scientists. So let's talk to Niba to learn more about her phenomenal STEM story. Hi Niba, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, this is so exciting. And as we were talking before, it was so nice to see you meet the other women in STEM in Miami. And anyone who's interested should go to your Instagram page and look up how beautifully you were all breaking stereotypes. I mean, that was just, I was sending pictures to my friends and family saying, oh my God, can you believe all these women are in STEM? Like, I can't believe.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was really surreal. I would say, like, first it was really surreal just seeing all these people that I've followed for, a really long time in real life. And then it was really incredible just having really scientific conversations peppered in with all of these random thoughts. Like, we would be having breakfast and talking about the ways that radios are bouncing off of waves, and that's what Aircy Sam uses in her PhD research. And at the same time, I'm just chilling on the balcony, painting my nails, and we're just hanging out. It's really incredible. I think a lot of this work in science communication that we all do is a lot of time just by ourselves, just kind of thinking of what to say and how to explain it and how to say it and etc. And at the end of the day, all of this is really about building real connections and building real concepts and friendships. And it was so nice. Samantha and Vishaka and Mary are all really incredible people. I'll admit I was a little nervous going in just because it was people I never knew, but this was honestly such an awesome experience. I hope I can meet up with more people and see these guys again in the future too. And highly hope that I see more of this, people meeting up and stuff in real life as well, because it's so much, I don't want to say it's better, but I feel like you really get to know more about these people and, the science and what everyone's doing and the kind of issues that we all face together. A re-emerging theme was really women in STEM and being a female in a male-dominated tech or work or science kind of place. So it was nice being able to say our struggles and then feel them being echoed and know that you're not alone, etc.
Yeah, which is so cool. Again, I'm super inspired by all you ladies, and I think I need to in my head I was I need to do a mini series with all these ladies in the same on the same episode or something. I don't know. I was having all ththese ideas because I've interviewed Vishaka, and her episode is the most downloaded one. She is just amazing. She's 21. Gosh. I'm what? You're so young and you're so brilliant. But all of them, really all of them, we need everything that you all are doing together. And so really excited to have you on the show. And now I just need to reach out to the other women in that picture so that I can have everyone on the show.
I can't speak for the other people, but I'm fairly sure that everyone would be very, very happy to do like a group episode together. Like we had so many like natural conversations that every 5 seconds we'd be like, oh my gosh, we should record this and put an IGTV, or oh my gosh, can someone like message Prasha and tell her to just like record all of this?
Yeah, definitely, anytime. And maybe we do a live a live Insta meet and then do a live podcast. But we'll do that.
Oh, gosh,
you guys are
so
opening
cool.
up more avenues for us. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
So now to your story. So before we get into the thick of it, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? And what got you to this point in your STEM journey?
Yeah, totally. So my name is Niba. I guess you guys already know that by now. So I grew up in California in the Bay Area, and I spent my entire childhood and was born and raised pretty much in California. And after kind of finishing high school in the Bay Area, I chose to go to school about 90 minutes away in UC Davis. And there I met a professor who truly changed my entire life, Professor Siobhan Brady. She was absolutely incredible. Just fresh when I joined college, just a month later, I was really interested in going and doing research because I knew that I was really interested in doing science, because I've always been interested in just understanding how things work and how they're moving, and just the application of the scientific method to pretty much any topic, whether that's like training your cat or workouts or genetics. It's, you know, the scientific method is incredibly versatile and incredibly powerful. And so when she gave me the opportunity to join her lab when I was only 17, that I didn't realize it at the time, but it was by far the best move of my entire life. So I was in her lab for all 4 years, and at the very end I was looking at different places and figuring out what to do after I graduated, and I had such a wonderful experience in her lab, learning not just about science and how to be a scientist, but also how to be like a good person, a good mentor, a good peer to work with. And one of the things that I was really inspired by was kind of the way that my professor taught me all of this. So when I was looking at grad schools, I was pretty heavily influenced, and she had done her postdoc with a person, Phil Benfey, at Duke University. So I went ahead and applied here and spoke to Phil a number of times before I actually decided to come here. So now I'm studying at Duke University. I'm just starting my 3rd year as a PhD candidate now. I passed my preliminary exam in May, which is pretty great. The exam pretty much just qualifies me as being, I have a similar education as like a master's degree essentially. So that's been really amazing. And my current project is now looking at the genetics of how plants grow and develop. And it's been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so amazing, because I think when people take chances on us, it's such a beautiful thing, because, you know, I wish more people took chances on more people
Absolutely.
who may not look like them, or who are not from where they are, or, you know, just giving people chances, because I totally resonate with that. People who gave me chances in the US like completely changed my life. You know, people who gave me chances in India too completely changed my life. If it wasn't for them to like believe in me, you know, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So
Absolutely,
I feel like,
you
know, people should do that more.
Yeah, I think a huge part of it was that my professor in undergrad was mixed race and female, and a lot of the people that were in our department were female. We had people who were openly gay. We had people who were multi-racial, multi-ethnic. We had people who spoke all kinds of languages. It was a very diverse and welcoming department to work in. And seeing all these people, you know, who were incredibly just very diverse, and I could see like parts of myself in each of these people, it kind of showed me that that maybe I do have the potential to be a scientist. I have the potential to do this as well. When like for so long I just thought like, oh, this is something that only, you know, certain types of people can do, or certain like level of smarts that you have to be, and imposter syndrome is really real, especially if, you know, you're coming from kind of more of a marginalized population. So having these mentors from diverse areas really impacted me.
Yeah, and I wish every one of us learns from that and tries to give back, you know, in whichever way, shape, or form, because that's just how we're going to create real change and make people feel included, but also make people be their own self in science, because that's so important. Like, you don't want to be someone else, you know, otherwise there's no point.
Yeah, there's a huge difference between, you know, changing who you are to fit what you think that academic society wants you to be, versus like just being yourself and continuing to do, you know, really good science, really good work. And I think with the first wave of people who were from a marginalized populations and backgrounds, the first wave of those people very much kind of embodied what academia has valued for so long. Independence, huge drive, kind of like very like go get it, like confident, etc. And much less so the emphasis on like mentoring or collaborations or being nurturing or being patient with your students. And that's what we're now seeing kind of being a new wave of what's being valued in academia as well.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of PhD candidates tell me on the show that, making sure that you vibe with your PI and, making sure that the PI is welcoming of you and is a good mentor can be a good starting point to a good PhD and a good academic journey, right?
Oh, yeah. I think it's much more than a starting point, though. Like, there's so many stories I hear about mentors who are incredible and mentors who aren't, and in my program, there's a lot of people who've had to switch out of their labs and restart, their research just from scratch because the fit just wasn't right for them. So I truly think the very first, most important decision that any PhD person or even a master's student makes is who they choose to work with and what kind of person and qualities they're looking for in their mentor.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. So tell us, through your research, you said you're learning about how plants grow and, the genetics in plants. What have you learned from, their resilience? Because, as we were talking last time, they're very resilient. So tell us a little bit about what you've learned and experienced in your journey of working with plants so far.
Yeah. So I will say a lot of plant resilience has come more from my undergrad experience. So in undergrad, I worked on a project understanding the genetics of tomato response to drought and waterlogging, which are two very different stresses. And it's super cool. Basically, we kind of looked at two different types of tomato. We looked at the tomato that's being grown as a crop all over the U.S. Then we looked at the wild relative. And this wild relative is really tolerant to drought. So if it can go 2 weeks or something without any water. And it's so cool because a lot of times in California, there's not exactly the best rainfall. So when drought hits, it really negatively impacts all these crops. So what we're trying to figure out is what are the genes that are being turned on or turned off in this drought-resistant tomato, and how is it that these genes can maybe be turned on or turned off in the regular tomato? Because since these tomatoes are totally related, a lot of the genes that they have are in common. They have more than 99% of their genes in common. So since it already exists, what we found is that there's a particular polymer called suberin, and suberin gets produced a ton when this drought tomato is undergoing drought. So then we started looking at the normal cultivated tomato that's grown in, farms across America, and we saw, this pathway totally exists. Suberin is there, and how is it that maybe we can ask this plant, hey, can you make a little bit more suberin, and see if this plant is going to be drought resistant as well.
That's amazing. No, I feel like I always thought that, because this is our first summer in our new house, and I had no idea about weeds and what a weed is and how many weeds you can have, and you have to take them out and it takes hours to take them out.
Oh yeah.
And so I was like, oh my god, we're not even watering these things and they keep coming. Then we're watering our plants but they won't grow.
I think that's the most incredible thing about plants is that they're so diverse. There's plants for every kind of light situation, every kind of watering situation, every kind of soil situation. They're growing on so many continents and so many environments. And I get a lot of people asking me like, oh, Niba, how do you grow so many plants in your house? Anyone who comes over, they'll see I have 200 plants in my house.
Wow.
Maybe not 200, maybe more like 175 or something like that. I went around and counted the other day. But the key, I think, really is just finding plants that work with you. All of my plants can handle very little watering because I only water once a week. All of my plants are relatively lower light. And having such a wide variety of plants is so incredible. I think also people there's this term I found recently called plant blindness. And it refers to the fact that plants don't really have faces, so we're not as attuned to remember them. Think about the last person you saw or the last animal you saw. It's much easier to recall that than what is the last plant you saw. And as we get farther and farther from growing plants and cultivating them for ourselves, we get farther and farther from understanding how important they are, not just for society, but for the globe and the earth total. So plant blindness has become a real problem. People not realizing the value of plants, the economic and social and cultural importance of plants. So I really hope that I can kind of show people, this is why it was important, this is why they're really cool, and this is why they're really easy. They're not really hard to take care of. You just got to find the plant that works for you, You don't want to force yourself to take care of a plant that's really high effort, Like I tried some plants that were high effort. They all died. That's okay. I got some plants that are a little less effort, and they look beautiful now.
Yeah. No, I think even cultures around the world have a very special place for plants. At least where I come from in India, they're a big part of our lives. Like the basil plant is like, they say like that's where the prosperity lives, and there's a lot of weightage around plants, and if you try to trace it back, you can see why they did that. Like there was scientific reason behind it. There was like, you need to be close to nature, you need to you need plants that produce like more oxygen in the middle of your house, or some stuff like that. And that kind of got lost in time when people started exchanging stories. But plants are like just really, really important. I was reading the other day about feng shui and how that also says you should have plants. And it's just something that all these cultures said is just the real meaning is kind of lost. And I'm so glad that you're doing this work. I have a question. I want to grow plants, right? So in the house, this is a little sidetrack, but I feel like, will they attract any insects and stuff like that? Will it, that's always been my concern with plants.
Yeah, totally. So some plants, all plants can be habitats, but there's also plants that are natural insecticides. So any plant that's citrus or related to citrus, they'll have like a natural repellent because of that citric acid. So one of the plants that I have outside where there are a lot of insects is a type of citrus plant. And by having that plant there, it kind of like, it's a very mild repellent, but the fact is these bugs have anywhere in the world to go. So if they're going to go somewhere that has even like a minus 0.0002, negativity or whatever, they're going to avoid it. So if you're worried about insects, I would suggest like look into plants that have natural like insect repellent in them. If you're worried about insects indoors, I would say it kind of depends on where you're living. For the most part, like insects indoors are not a huge problem, but if you live in an area that's got tons and tons of bugs, then you might want to like lean towards plants that are like insect repellent.
That's amazing. Yeah, I had that question. Always had that question because I was like always leaning towards like fake plants because I'm like, okay, I can't kill them, so let me buy fake plants. And since I've been following you and I see your house and stuff, I'm like, if she can do it, there's a chance I can try too. So
yeah.
So I thought I'd ask.
It's funny actually. I've only been growing plants for maybe like, I want to say like 13 or 14 months now, and it's like really incredible to me how easy it was. For a long time I was really intimidated by like these real gardeners and like beautiful botanic gardens. I'm like, oh my god, these people have so much skill, what are they doing? And I realized it's not that hard. You just like pick up some plants and just water them as you go. And like the number one thing I realized is that plants are much happier if you skip watering. So sometimes I'll go like 2 weeks without even watering my plants, and they're not happy by the end of it, but they're still alive. I think the biggest thing that people do with plants is they are like, oh, I have this plant, what do I do? What do I do to take care of it? And like that's what you have to do with an animal, you got to like feed it every day, make sure it goes outside, blah blah blah. But with plants, they're just happy chilling out. The best thing you can do for them is just let them chill. You chill with them. Yeah. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, there's so much to learn from plants. I think patience is definitely one of those things.
Oh, absolutely.
I once did a meditation which was based on plants, and it was more like think like a plant, just think like, imagine that you're a tree and imagine that a storm is coming, and see how a tree behaves in a storm. It stays, like it doesn't move, it doesn't leave, and it's grounded. So plants have so much to teach on a spiritual level as well. I feel like it's
absolutely. There's a lot of research on psychology of plants too, actually. Like humans have been evolved to specifically look at the color of chlorophyll green, and that will bring out like certain hormones and things in our body that'll naturally just tell us like, hey, you're safe, you're good, there's food around, there's greenery around, there's water around, you're good to go. And grocery stores are kind of like a new thing. Our body hasn't learned that there's grocery stores around yet. One of the biggest things that they found when they started putting plants up in the space station is not necessarily that the food was really great for the astronauts, but more so the psychology of having a plant, a growing thing there was insanely high. One of the biggest problems they have with astronauts is, depression from being apart from everybody, being very isolated. Like, they have each other to talk to, they can still, radio down and talk to Earth, but being isolated from every single living thing except for whoever's in your station with you. When they added these plants in, the number one feedback that they got from all the astronauts was how much happier they were seeing these plants grow and just hang out with the plants in their little space station.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that maybe that's the reason for green being such a positive color. Like, I would think so. Right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I've noticed a huge,
that makes sense.
marked improvement in my mood just waking up and seeing all these plants around me. Like, the first thing when I wake up is I see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 plants in my room.
That's amazing. So tell us, what got you interested in plants?
That's kind of a funny story, actually. I don't know if that's actually a really viable question, but a large part of it was just that when I started as an undergrad working in Siobhan Brady's lab, I was really interested in the intersection of biology, computer science, and climate change. So I was on a project looking at the effects of higher carbon dioxide on crop plants. And the more I researched, the more I realized that if climate change is climate change is awful. It's horrible, but we've gone past so many points of no return that the only way to really solve it is going to be with some kind of natural synthetic approach. And it's going to take something on multiple efforts, multiple fronts, reducing beef consumption, improving the crop yield that we have, improving our oxygen, etc. But at the root of every single one of these solutions was plants. Every single one of them, biofuels, food. We're running out of food for the world. We're running out of oxygen, blah blah blah. And I kept on coming back to plants are the solution. They're the most basic, simple life form upon which everything else is still continuing to happen. And obviously there's microorganisms and things like that, but I'm speaking more from a animal human type perspective. So the more I realized how valuable they are and how it was just so much fun, spending every single summer hanging out in the greenhouse and just doing research. I just had so much fun. I just kept thinking to myself, all I want to do is just hang out with plants and tell people how cool they are.
Yeah, oh, that's amazing. So where do you see yourself in 5 years? So where does this career lead you in the future?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. I'm not sure yet. So PhDs take about minimum 5 years. My program advertises as being a 5-year genetics PhD program at Duke, but our average age to completion is 6.5 years. My project in particular requires a lot of time and growth of not just plants, but also yeast and also bacteria. So there's a lot of steps that I have to take that are overnight. So I'm not really sure how long my PhD is going to be taking. I often get questions of what's going to happen? When are you going to be finished? How many years longer? And I honestly have no clue, but for now it's just been really fun. I'm trying to keep my options open between multiple career choices. One thing that I think is really valuable is making sure that as a PhD student you don't only look at a career path in academia, because academia is the only career path that you consistently interact with every single day. But looking at all the careers outside, whether that's science communication, non-governmental organizations, volunteering, going into government, going into health, going into consulting, there's a myriad of options to choose from. And I think if you're able to explore those options, perhaps even do an internship like I will be doing, then that can really help you kind of get a feel for what will best fit your interests and needs and personality.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, because if you kind of just decide or stick to one path, you kind of block yourself from learning new skills and kind of just growing in the process, which can also lead to feeling stagnated or stuck, or
Absolutely.
Very, very reliable on just that one thing that's going on, and then comes a point where you can't separate the two, where you don't know where you start and where PhD starts, and you become the same. And that's where I think a lot of stress kind of comes from, not just for PhD, but even in any form of education or even careers. I think people get too close to it, and then don't grow and don't learn and don't stay open to a lot of different things, and then the stress rises because now, oh wait, by the way, I didn't grow and now everything depends on this one thing. So it's always great to kind of keep looking at your options. Before I ask you more about your side hustle of modeling, tell me, what is your PhD research about? Because you just talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So my PhD research is about how exactly plants are growing and developing. So just like how humans have different tissues and different organs, like our lungs and our liver and whatever, it's really important that when we're growing inside of our mother in our womb and we're developing, it's really important that the cells that become your tongue or your eyeballs or whatever, they're properly positioned, right? Like you don't want to have your taste buds on your eyeballs or whatever. And so it's very similar in plants, right? So you want to make sure your tissues go the exact space that they're supposed to go. So there's one single gene in a plant that's responsible for the division of an entire tissue layer. So without this one gene, an entire tissue layer is not there. But what we're not sure about is how exactly this gene is turned on, how exactly it's being expressed across not just time, but also space, and how it is that this single protein is able to coordinate like an entire tissue layer forming. That's oftentimes not very heard of in a lot of developmental areas, like you wouldn't think a single gene would turn on your entire eyeball pathway, right? That's not how it works in humans. So this is a really great study because it's just got like one gene directly related to one tissue. So what I'm doing is trying to figure out if I can create like different patterns of expression of this particular gene in the mutant plant. So if I can create the right pattern of expression in the mutant, then that mutant will be able to be rescued and look just like the wild type, and it'll be able to grow that entire tissue layer right back. So once I find the right expression of that gene and put it in the mutant, then we get a whole new tissue layer, and that's my PhD.
That's awesome. Am I understanding it right? Is it cloning a plant?
In some ways, it's cloning a plant. What I'll be doing more specifically is basically cloning different gene circuits to create different expression levels. And so each plant will be cloned a different way, and the plant that's able to regain that tissue layer will be one with a very particular set of gene circuits. And then I'll look at those gene circuits and say like, oh, this is how it was turned on across time and space. So that must be pretty similar to how the wild type in the normal plant, that the gene is turned on across time and space.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's really cool.
That's so innovative. Yeah.
It's very much like a cutting edge kind of technology. I'm using a bunch of stuff that's been coming out in like the last couple of years. It's very like new and exciting, and it's entirely like based out of a synthetic biology approach, which has been a very recent kind of field that's been emerging. And synthetic biology is more so used usually for like creating drugs or moving metabolic pathways and stuff like that. So it's really interesting being able to use it to try and understand plant development rather than how can I move this like entire metabolic pathway from plant A to plant B.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's a great time to be a scientist because of the technologies, how fast they're coming to life.
It's a great time to be a geneticist for sure.
Yeah, I would think so. I don't know a lot about genetics to talk to you more about it, but again, it's just a wonderful time to be alive in terms of just technology growing so fast, and the resources that we have today, which we didn't have even 5 years ago. Like, I went to college like maybe 5 years ago, literally 5 years ago, and no, not 5 actually, 7 or something years ago. I'm too old, but when you forget which year did you graduate, it means a lot. It's been a long time. But at that time, we didn't even have a phone with camera on it.
Oh my gosh!
So I don't have pictures with my roommates. Can you believe it?
That's wild. Yeah, it's crazy even in terms of like. Just like technology-wise, the first like genome to be sequenced cost so many thousands and millions of dollars, and like now if I want to like sequence something, it costs $8. I just like send it to the it's $8. That's so cheap. It's amazing. Incredible.
Yeah, I think computer science and just technology itself has come a long way, and this is a new frontier. Like they're calling it the technological revolution, like how they had the industrial revolution,
and the green revolution, etc. Yeah.
Super cool. It's super cool. So tell us about how did you get interested in modeling, because that's something that you do on the side. So tell us a little bit about that part of your life.
Yeah, totally. So I started modeling in California. I'm still modeling now. Back in California, I kind of developed a really solid appreciation for art, especially visual. I'm a very visual person, visual learner. And so I started modeling in California, and when I moved, I decided, maybe I wouldn't let me take that back. I started modeling in California, and it was a lot of fun. It was really incredible being able to meet all these people and go all these places. And one of the things that I encountered over and over again was just people being very surprised that I was also a scientist, that I was also doing research in a research lab, that I was also, pursuing a bachelor's in genetics and a double minor in environmental toxicology and minority studies. And it was just kind of a little out of place, I guess. Not a lot of people, have this combination of being a scientist and also modeling. And when I kept getting that over and over again, I kept on thinking to myself, oh my gosh, these are so different. These are so separate. I don't understand. I'm the only person doing this. And it wasn't until just a couple months ago when I started my my brand, Notes by Niba, that I was able to meld these two different parts of my personality into a more cohesive and clean and more beautiful thing than what they are separately. A lot of cool things that I've learned in science I can apply to modeling, and a lot of things I've learned from modeling I apply to science. For example, when I'm taking pictures at a microscope, it's much easier for me to understand the way the microscope works because I understand how cameras work. And every lab kind of has their point person for talking to about a certain technology. We have one person for sequencing, we have one person for cloning, and I very quickly became the person to talk to for microscopy, which has been super cool. And on the other flip side, I take a lot of things I learned from science and I apply it to my modeling. One thing that's really important for models is to have a really good skincare routine, skincare setup. And by understanding the science behind how it works and how the largest organ in your body functions, it's been incredibly easy. And being able to kind of mesh these two together and finally be able to say my personality isn't just two separate or multiple individual separate pieces, I'm a whole person that works together, and these things, they bleed over in different parts of your life. So I really hope that people can kind of see that scientists aren't just this one-dimensional creature that's just doing science. We have different interests. We are all, we're painters, we're writers, we're artists. Some people like video games, some people like modeling, some people like makeup, and these things aren't just important in terms of understanding the scientist, but, it's important in understanding the science too, because at the end of the day, scientists are also people, and understanding where these people come from is really important when you're trying to figure out, negotiations or collaborations or what's important to people. And by understanding people as more holistic individuals, I think it really helps to be more empathetic and honestly to just understand the world as a whole.
Yeah. No, I think that's you put it really beautifully, and I think it's so important to pursue other things and also discover yourself. I think there's so much value to it because you feel fulfilled, you feel happy. A lot of us are, if you stopped anyone on the street and asked what are they looking for, they're probably going to say happiness, because a lot of us are looking for it, and we just forget that we can generate it, we can produce it, and by pursuing other aspects of our personality. And that's something that's hard to put in words sometimes, but it's true.
It is. It's funny you say that. I was going to say this earlier, I totally forgot, but one thing that my professor strongly emphasized when I first joined grad school, and at first I didn't understand what he was saying, but he kept on emphasizing that you need to cultivate an internal value system, and he kept saying that over and over again. And at first I was like, what is he talking about? Of course I'm happy, I've got my own values, blah blah blah. But I realized now what he meant is you need to have something that gives you value and keeps you happy that comes internally, not externally. And oftentimes, PhD students, we get a lot of validation from our external factors. We were all straight A students. We all, did honors classes. I took 14 or something APs in high school, but it's not a big deal because everyone did that. But then when you finally hit, your point where it's for the first time experiments don't work. So for the first time things are not going perfectly according to plan. I'm not getting straight hundreds on every single thing like I did in high school or whatever. And having an internal value system of things that you can depend on regardless of one portion of your life, failing a little bit is absolutely critical. I started developing a love for plants. I started gardening. I get happiness from seeing new plants. I get happiness from training my cat to do new tricks. I get a lot of happiness, especially from working on Notes by Niba, because it's just so much fun being able to create content and learn about things. I recently made a video about how henna works. And, at first I was like, oh, that would be a cute concept. And then as I was researching it, I was learning more and more and more about not just, henna, but also my own culture, being Indian, learning how henna was used culturally and how to apply it, how it works, and the dye molecules. And it was just so fulfilling being able to integrate all these things in my life together. And it's really helped me when, experiments don't go so well. I had a very rough couple months where for 9 months, nothing worked. For 9 full months, my progress was going nowhere. For 9 months, my PhD was literally just stagnant. And it was freaking so frustrating. But I realize now, that's what my professor meant when he was saying you need to cultivate this internal value system. Because if you don't have that, then, your happiness is just depending on whatever thing it's depending on. And that's not sustainable.
No, and then that's not healthy either, because then you put a lot of pressure on your career, you put a lot of pressure on your partners. I see that all the time. People expect partners
the emotional labor.
Magically make you happy. And I think it's just too much pressure. I think it's your responsibility, and you should explore that, because again, there's so many outlets in today's day and age. So tell us a little bit about what are your outlets. So you have an Instagram page, and then...
Yeah, so I guess my main, one of my many outlets is my Instagram page, which is largely filled with kind of the different parts of my personality, whether that's me doing science and talking about what I do in the lab. I also talk about, my modeling and ways that I'm creatively expressing myself there, and working with people, and people, especially for modeling. I do a lot of modeling for charity as well now. I am part of an agency, Models for Charity, based out of North Carolina. And it's been incredibly rewarding being able to kind of showcase all these different things that I'm doing. I also have a YouTube channel in which I'm kind of showing how you can look at style and lifestyle through a scientific lens. Like I mentioned before, henna is a beautiful body art and it's a style that people can choose, but do you understand how the dye molecule Lawson works? Do you understand how you can if you understand how the dye molecule works, how can you use that to make the dye come out stronger, when you learn the process behind why we do style the way we do and the science behind it, then you're able to enhance your own style. And I think that's incredibly interesting.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I think there's a need for it. There is a lot of, beauty tips and products and things that are being thrown at us on Instagram, especially.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So we need people like you to tell us what is right and what's going on, so that we don't get misled by these huge marketing campaigns that are so pretty looking that you need to tap on it and buy it. It's so hard to not buy it. They've cracked some code in our brains that we can't stop buying things.
Yeah, the psychology of marketing is becoming a hot topic. There's a lot of debate about the ethics of marketing. What are the ethics of marketing when you're using psychological tricks to get children who are children and making them be more addicted to whatever game or whatever advertisement or whatever. And especially with cosmetics and skincare, they don't fall under the FDA. There's no one who's regulating cosmetics and skincare beyond all right, does this kill someone? No? Okay, fine, whatever. So there's people who are putting for example, essential oils on their face. And essential oils don't have a lot of scientific research behind them. And a lot of people can get allergic, they can break out, they can get hives. Some people have gone to the hospital because they don't understand how these things work. But they saw, on some ad or some website that wasn't scientifically peer reviewed, and they saw it worked for some random person. They're like, oh, let me try putting black henna freckles on my face or something like that. But black henna isn't henna. It's a it's got black hair dye in it, and it's got a toxin, PPD, and you can get severe allergic reactions, severe burns. People will go to the hospital, they'll have to get skin grafts. It's really scary how much misinformation is out there and how little regulation there is on all of these products. So I'm really hoping that people can try and learn, not just, from me, just learning oh, these are good, but I want them to be able to learn and think for themselves. So that way when they encounter something totally new that I haven't talked about, they can make an informed decision based on what they've learned already.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge part of science communication as well, right? So to help people and public make good decisions and choose for themselves, because obviously you can't force people to choose things, but again, using science to educate people and
increasing scientific literacy in the general public. Yeah,
just like awareness. And I feel like we're going backwards in some senses. Like, we did all this, it came here, and then now with technology we're kind of going backwards
a little bit. It's so much easier to share things now and like spread misinformation and spread stuff. There's a lot of like different ways of sharing things that aren't always filtered. And as much as technology has helped things, it's definitely, hurt things as well. This whole anti-vaccine movement, it's all born out of misinformation about a single paper that was released, and that paper was later retracted. It was shown to be incorrect, false information. But because of, how far it's spread and the viralness, nature of the internet, now there's all these people who are dying from preventable diseases. There's children who are dying from measles, when that never needed to happen. You don't have to die from measles, just get vaccinated. And if we try and I think if we try and explain to people better rather than just telling them this is what you should be doing, then that's where we can really try and cause change.
Yeah, and I feel like not just doing it when things go out of control, but doing it all the time, right?
Exactly.
Not just saying, now I have global warming, so let's talk about global warming. Like, we should continue to talk about nature. We should continue to talk about, the vaccinations. And, I was reading this book by Melinda Gates called Moment of Lift, and she's talking about all these kids who are dying because of vaccinations that are in America, and you can't get it to the other countries. And then you look around and you go like, okay, so there are Americans who are deciding not to vaccinate their kids. Like, how crazy is that?
It's so wild,
It's just so hard.
I saw a comic one time that was talking about climate change, and it was like, what if climate change isn't real and we create a better world for no reason? Like, all these green technologies will help. They're sustainable. They're cheaper in the long run. Like, if we can just start thinking about, our children and the next generations and leaving it better than we found it, then we can just start making change right now. We need to stop being so short-sighted and like killing all these trees to have $1 now versus $5 like down the line. People need to stop getting so
so short-sighted.
Yeah.
But the Amazon jungle is burning. So tell us a little bit while I know I don't want to create stress, but
no, you're good.
Maybe if there's one thing that people can do to help something that big, because I feel like a lot of times as someone who's so removed from the situation, and same thing goes for global warming, it's not necessarily just the Amazon, we feel like we can't do anything. It's just too big for me to do anything, right? So what would be your advice to some of us who may not know exactly what to do and where to start?
Well, there's a number of things, really. I think first it's important to remember that individuals by ourselves cannot cause change, but working together we kind of can. But more so, it's important to create policies and changes from a global, governmental, and company-wide standpoint, because a lot of the things that we can do as individuals are unfortunately not as powerful as, like, say, a carbon tax that's implemented from government. So as we do things on the individual level, it's important to remember that there's, we should be also lobbying for these other things. That said, there are a lot of things that individuals can do. The number one thing I would recommend for the Amazon specifically is honestly donating for indigenous peoples and indigenous peoples' land in the Amazon. And by that way, you can directly impact the land itself rather than going through like a middleman of, helping some other thing that then helps the Amazon, if that makes any sense. Another thing that people can do is probably honestly reduce their beef consumption. A lot of the beef that America gets is not necessarily from Brazil, but beef is a huge export of Brazil. And the way that cattle is being farmed and harvested I guess, in Brazil is not at all sustainable. The methods of cattle farming over there are largely different, and by reducing the global need for beef overall, that can hugely impact, reducing the deforestation of the Amazon, if you're worried about that at all. And also, furthermore, beef is also, unfortunately, cows, they fart a lot, is the reality of it. Cows fart a lot. And the farting contains methane gas, which is in some ways almost worse than carbon dioxide in terms of greenhouse gases and making the ozone thinner and creating different climates around the world. And if we look at kind of like the different ways that we can use land, we can also, instead of just, having cattle, we can also use that land to grow crops. We can use that land to provide like homes for people, etc. And in terms of just like overall sustainability, the way that beef is being farmed, especially for like fast food joints, oh my gosh, it's not sustainable. It is directly one of the leading causes of global warming, way more so than, like cutting out your beef intake will be way better than reducing your showers or reducing, what else is there? Like, switching to Diva cups or something like that for women's menstrual cycles. I think it's really important to kind of identify what are the areas that we can make the biggest change, and not everyone can make those changes, and that's okay. But it's important to see, first of all, what are the areas that I can make the biggest change, which of those areas can I actually participate in, and then just do it. It's really important that we all kind of come together on this issue, because it's a global issue. It's not only these people are affected issue.
No, and I think eating too much beef is not helping America's obesity problem either. So, should be, you would think that people must be thinking by now, but I guess not.
I think the real solution is just, if you're interested in eating beef, make sure you get it from a sustainable location. There's nothing wrong with eating beef or chicken or whatever you want to eat. Just make sure that you're getting it from a sustainable place. And I realize that those places are more expensive, and I realize that that's not always economical, but you can get the nutrition that you want from not eating meat as well.
Oh yeah, like my entire family is vegetarian, like all of them. Like they can't believe that we eat chicken every day, and my mom is just mind blown when she's here. We don't even buy chicken. Like she'll cook everything vegetarian, and my husband cannot even tell. Like he grew up here, and he can't even tell. He's like, that wasn't chicken, and I'm like, no. Like that was jackfruit, and it was great, and it just tastes like the same.
You can make things delicious, absolutely.
Yeah. And again, Indian food is one of the best cuisines for vegetarian food. Like, we grew up like that. In our house, like in India, chicken is very expensive. You can't buy beef, you can't buy pork. The fast food chains are still just coming up. And growing up, it was always just vegetarian food, and only birthdays or any kind of celebrations is when we got chicken. Wow. So it's not unbelievable. For us, it's more a believable world where people could sustain on vegetarian diet. Mm-hmm. So that being said, we could not get into the details of your writing and how much you love it. Okay. But tell us just a couple of things that people can do to get good at writing, because you said you love writing and you have some great tips on how to become a good writer.
Yeah, totally.
So tell us a little bit about that before we close the conversation.
Okay, yeah. So if you guys will follow me on any of my social media platforms, you'll know that the reason I started was really because I started journaling every single day, and the thoughts that I got from there, I realized that I wanted to start sharing with the world. Mm-hmm. And I think that people they start out with being like, oh my gosh, you journal every day, you filled so many journals, how did you do it? And it's really about just kind of like setting aside like a little bit of time to just sit down and think and let your brain process things. You'll read online in many like psychology or meditation or like self-help locations that writing out what you want from your life, like your visualizations of what you would like to have happen, whether you want to like get a new promotion, whether you want to get a new car, writing down things that you're grateful for, writing down just, even if you're just thinking about an experience, just writing it out can really help your brain process it rather than sitting there with the anxiety or the nervousness or the worry or whatever it is that's causing it. And in some ways, also writing down positive things can be amazing. Researchers have found that if you write down a positive experience that you had, it actually re-releases all of those happy, positive molecules into your brain. So you get flushed with all of those again, and there's countless, so many studies about how people who are less stressed, that's the best way to live. You get sick less often, you have less mental health problems, you get less physical problems, your body is just happier and healthier. And journaling is definitely one of the best ways to do it. I think it's a little intimidating to sit down and stare at like a totally blank page. So I would suggest writing down 4 things every time someone starts to write. First, write down just the date, the time, and then the location, just to kind of like set the mood and show like, all right, this is where I am, kind of ground yourself a little bit. and then followed by what are the emotions that you're feeling exactly in that moment. And as I write down the emotions, that's where my thoughts start kicking in, where I'm like, I'm feeling happy because my cat like finally learned this new trick I've been trying to teach her today. I'm feeling tired because I just got back from Miami, but at the same time I'm feeling very refreshed because I had such a lovely time there. And kind of, sitting down and processing and organizing all of your thoughts. Even though it sounds really boring and mundane, I can tell you that the research, the science, and from my own personal experience, it hugely helps not just your mental health, but in the long run, your physical health too. So anyone who's like even slightly thinking about journaling, I would strongly recommend just do it like first thing in the morning before you even reach for your phone. Just keep a little journal by your bed. Sit down, write down like a page, write down half a page. It doesn't matter how long, it doesn't matter how short. Like, there's no pressure on, writing every day or whatever. Just whatever you feel like you need in that moment is the best.
Yeah, and I followed your advice from last time we talked, and I tried to write, a lot of stuff, which
yay!
when I was I was kind of following like this pattern and, trying to like just say gratitude or just talk about, good things or bad things. But then, I just like kind of like, as you said, like word vomit, like I just like wrote everything.
Oh, yeah.
And, I did that for a week and it felt so great. Like it felt just perfect. I felt so much clarity. I felt so much grounding. And in terms of just not being anxious. And, again, there's so many ways to journal. And this is, sometimes this happens with stuff which is very, very popularized or very glamorized or very like, oversold to us, right? Like journaling, meditation, exercise. There's just too many options. We don't know which one to pick. Like,
yeah, it's
like, where
do
we start?
It's a lot. I think, there's so much push on all these like complicated things. You have to buy this in order to be happy, and you have to buy that. You have to get this specific planner so you'll be motivated to write. No, you don't. My first journal was a $2 find at like a bookstore, and I sat down and I was like, you know what? Everyone keeps telling me that this is a good thing. Why don't I commit to just finishing this journal? And then after that, if I decide it's not for me, it's not for me, whatever. But at least I can say I've given it a fair shot. Yeah. And by the time I finished that journal, I felt so good about myself that I just decided to just keep on going. And I'm now at like, I think 27, oh no, I just started 28 journals. And it just kept on going. It's a habit that kind of like going to the gym. Once you start going a lot, you realize how great it makes you feel and you just don't want to stop. Just like eating healthy or hanging out with your friends, hanging out with a loved one, it just feels good. Why would you want to stop it? The initial activation energy barrier may be a little bit there, but if everything in life was easy, then what's the point?
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And again, I tried it, so it worked, and everyone should try it at least once.
So glad
There's nothing
you tried
to lose.
it. Yeah, if anyone tries it who's listening to this podcast, shoot me a DM. I would love to hear about your guys' experiences. I'm always really happy when I hear about people writing as a result of this.
Yes. And because I think a lot of the, like, in my opinion, like, really, after talking to you, it changed a lot. Because for me, writing was, the way I was thinking was more like, writing op-eds and, writing articles and writing grants, and, which I do have to do at some point. But I don't have to start there. Like, that was kind of my takeaway from last time we spoke.
Journaling is like, you don't have to go back and edit, the act of journaling itself is it. You're not trying to, like, if you're writing a grant, then the purpose is writing a grant and getting something out of it. But the act of journaling is literally just writing, getting something out on the paper. It doesn't matter if you go back and read it. It doesn't matter if you like edit it. It doesn't matter what sentence you say or the way you say it. Like, sometimes I don't even like form proper sentences because I'll start with part of a clause and then I'll end with another one because that's just how I'm thinking in that moment. And that's what it is mattering to me, is just understanding the thoughts rather than, oh, I'm trying to write this essay or whatever.
Yeah, and I think you used a really good word last time, the flow of consciousness. And I was just like stuck by that. And I was like, I need to write it down because, it's just so important. Some of it is really valuable. So if you read it, because I was telling someone today that, you can start seeing some patterns about negative self-talk, about, how you view the world, how you view the people around you. You just start seeing that pattern. And I, of course, for every one of us has that negative self-talk, but I had a lot of like pre-assumptions about the way situations should go. And I was kind of like able to untangle that, and it was like going to a therapist. I mean, it was really cool. So thank you.
Yeah, it's incredible. Absolutely. I think flow of consciousness while you're writing is really important. Like, even if you're writing down the words, I don't know what to write down right now, what do I say? sometimes I'll literally write that because that's what I'm currently thinking. It's important to just like continually just like get in the habit of just kind of pushing it out, especially in the beginning when you're trying to like get over that hump of like, this is weird, I'm not used to this, what do I say, etc. It's really nice to just kind of streamline it out, get it out there, word vomit it all out, and you'll find it's much easier when it comes time to write a grant, write an article, write, a letter, because since you've got this practice with just getting things out of your head, no longer the blank page is no longer this weird source of like, oh gosh, what's this now? The anxiety, it's gone. It's beautiful.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you've helped me because we just finished our first grant. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, congrats. Did you submit it already?
Okay. Huh?
Did you submit it already?
Yeah, no, so submission is like later, but now it's gone for peer review within our team, so they're going to look at it. But this is the first time like I really got over the fear and really like started like writing and being like, no, I'm a writer, I'm going to write like whatever.
I'm so happy. That makes me so happy. Oh my gosh.
Thank you. And then also, I feel like the word writer is such a wow, like, oh my god, you have to be like a novel writer. No, like anyone who writes can be a writer, so I changed my bio and I'm a writer now, so
Yay.
Like I was like, sue me if you want to, like I'm gonna do it. Like
no one's got a monopoly on writing, don't worry about that. Yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy this helped. Yay.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell us, what's that one thing that people can take away from your story?
From my story, I would say the one thing that people can take away from my story is that this may be kind of cheesy, but like kind of embracing who you are. I think a lot of times in STEM fields or any kind of patriarchally dominated field, whether that's politics, STEM, pretty much every freaking field ever, really, there's this kind of pressure to conform to the field's view of success. For example, like being very independent, being very aggressive, being very outspoken and driven, and this pressure to kind of conform to that. But you don't necessarily have to do that. If you lean into the parts of yourself that are you and make up who you are, you'll find that by bringing that individuality and that diversity to the team, you're bringing a different way of thinking, you're bringing a different way of including other people in the conversation, you're attracting people that the current status does not attract. And by leaning into, perhaps your mentorship or your skills talking to people, conversing with people, nurturing others, building collaborations, building teams, all these skills that are historically not as valued, art, like art, beauty, etc. By bringing those to the team, you can not only diversify the team, but you're also diversifying yourself, you're building yourself. So truly trying to figure out what it is that makes you you and really use that to your advantage. And it's a lot easier said than done, and it's super cheesy because people say it all the time, but it's because it's true. At the end of the day, they say meditation and journaling and like being you is important and useful because at the end of the day, it's still true. Time and time again, there's tons of studies from spiritual, religious, science, many things have all said the exact same thing. So, if this many studies are pointing towards it, maybe just give it a shot.
Yeah, and I feel like it's hard to understand it. That's why everyone keeps saying it, because people don't understand it.
Yeah, I think it's a journey for sure that everyone makes by themselves. I will say, like, my mentors have helped me so much along that way and building the things that I'm interested in and figuring out my hobbies and not just, like, numbing myself when there's a negative thing. And there's, like, this huge, like, especially in today's society, there's this tendency to just numb yourself with, like, TV or like something that just kind of turns your brain off and like lets you, if you've got an issue, you can focus on something else rather than thinking about it and like deciding to do something else that is not just a numbing. You don't want to numb yourself. You want to turn that negative thought, experience, feeling, whatever it is, into a positive one, and that takes a lot more energy, than just like numbing it with some sort of thing or substance or TV or whatever the heck. So it's work, but it's a lot more rewarding, it's a lot more sustainable, and in the end, you come out as a happier and more fulfilled individual.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So tell us, what's your favorite book?
My favorite book? Ooh, that's a good one. There's so many good books that I really love. Oh gosh. I will say probably The Plant Messiah is one of my top ones. It kind of refers to that term I was talking about earlier, plant blindness. It's about this dude who just like talks about how cool plants are all over the world and how weird and wonderful they are. That would be my favorite current science book. Also, I read a lot of like solid literature. I would say sometimes A Great Notion is one of my favorites. It's by Ken Casey, author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and it's incredibly like, it shows how different perspectives can be, and how different biases and different perspectives and the history of a place and the generations before can really impact the now. And the way it's written is absolutely beautiful literature work. It is a little dense in terms of literature, but it's such a stunning read.
Yeah, awesome. Again, thank you so much, Niba, for joining us and sharing such a wholesome story with us. I mean, we went from, it was quite a journey. So we went from what you like about plants, to your research, to everything that makes you you and unique, to your writing, and kind of taking a full circle to, you know, why your story is so special. So thank you so much again, taking the time to talk to us today.
No, thank you so much, Prasha. Thank you to everyone who's listening. Thank you to everyone who listens to this podcast in general. It's really kind of important to get these stories out there, and thank you for helping getting this visibility out there.
And that was Niba with her amazing STEM story. Please use the links in the episode notes to follow Niba and her amazing work on Instagram and on YouTube. If you like our show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite podcasting platform. We'll see you again next week. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.